receivables are not reported accurately, and the benchmarking. I think Roshan, aap agar ye pehle question kar sakein and Rafi can.
As regards receivables, I think they are reported very regularly in the newspapers. I'm sure Yaqub can testify to that. Even BICO's receivables are in the newspapers. PARCO, PRL, on I think at least 2 to 3 times a week we get those receivables in the. And none of our reports, I mean, we are totally transparent as far as our receivables go. We make so much of a hue and cry on the receivables because naturally they are a lifeline. We need our cash. And whether it's at the government level, whether it's to our shareholders, stakeholders, we are very transparent about our receivables and even with our bankers. Because naturally it is against those receivables that we expect cash to come in, and the party from whom we expect the cash to come in also expects or makes sure that the numbers are right. So I would say that as far as receivables go, we are quite upfront about.
I think it's in their interest these days to tell everyone the receivables and say कि मैं मर गया हूँ, मेरे पास पैसे नहीं है. And I think that's how you'll get the money back.
Just to add to that as well, something that Yaqub referred to in his presentation was the analyst briefings. I think if they are held frequently and the analysts are sort of up to the ball in terms of the analysis, I think there can be a good exchange, and particularly coming from Mr. Mehenti over there, they can actually grill the CFO or the CEO of those companies and try and get maximum information, particularly the capital markets.
We'll go to the next question. My request is, if the question is just one part question and specifically a question and short, so we can have more of those, more people can get a chance. Gentleman right there, next up,
I didn't hear anything in this panel discussion about the problems of ethics. Or do ethics and other liabilities confuse things?
What exactly?
Ethics, corporate governance.
Yeah, in this day and age of receivable management and cash flow management, ethics play a very big role because you don't get paid because you don't pay somebody in turn. And this chain goes around. What goes around comes around. So I want to know what are the ethics that the CFOs promote within their companies. What does this panel promote?
Ms. Babu?
Perhaps, I could shed some light on this. I can tell you about my company as Tetra Pak, a very strong focus on ethics. We have a corporate charter where clearly, we've spelled out the ethics. And of course, being the industry leaders, and there is that much more responsibility on us in terms of how our behavior is conducted. And, what Dr. Saab was also saying, that ethics has a long-term business advantage for you as well. It's not just, in short term, like he was giving the example of those companies which were not reflecting their numbers well. Well, in the long term, they were also not being able to grow in the way they could have. So, as far as multinationals are concerned, specifically as far as Tetra Pak is concerned, a very, very strong corporate governance framework that we have to follow. And basically, if you are disaligned with the law, you can just lose your job the next day. So.
I think it's very cool to be the CFO of Enron, except if ethical practices aren't there, it's not going to last for too long. Next question from the gentleman here. Agar aap please apne aap ko introduce bhi kara sakein.
I have one small thing to add on.
Dosa. We all have heard of the word corruption. In fact, we all probably faced with corruption. And they say in a country where there's corruption, education level is low, related, human resources are not available, related, the direct investments coming into the country are also low. In Pakistan, we all realize corruption is rampant. What do the CFOs experience with corruption, and what are they doing to combat it?
Aslam Saab, would you like to take that question?
Well, it reminds me of an ad I saw recently on a TV, and that goes something like that, कि लेते क्यों हैं? क्योंकि हम देते हैं. So I know there are a lot of multinationals who are very firm about that. We cannot afford to have this practice. It is difficult. It will be difficult. But somewhere we have to take a start. And I'm sure CFOs are firm believers of that don't fight for your rights, make sure that you're paying the right taxes, and then avoid these corruptions. Because once you get in the circle, then there's no end to it.
And there's a cost to actually avoiding that corruption. because आप कहीं भी जाएं, आप कुछ भी काम करवाना चाहें, and as I mentioned, and this is where the communication with government comes in a strong way, and I don't mean communication of the corrupt kind, I mean communication of the clean kind. आप refund लेने जाते हैं, आप कुछ काम कराने जाते हैं, you are inevitably going to come up with that issue, and at the end of the day, it will be your resolve and your company's resolve in how you are able to resist that, and there is a cost. अगर आपके refund stuck up हैं और आपको वो एक cost पड़ रही है and you're not getting it because आप 10% नहीं दे रहे या 5% नहीं दे रहे, तो cost तो पड़ेगी company को. So there is a cost to fighting that corruption, and I think most of us here, at least the panelists and a lot of my friends and colleagues here
and the moderator
and the moderator, sorry, yes, would like to think that we make our little bit or tuppence worth of contribution towards eradicating or towards at least fighting it, if you're not in a position to eradicate it.
And if someone thinks that they're following corrupt practices, then nobody would know they're living in a fool's paradise, because everybody knows that when you knock this door, this is what happens here, and this doesn't happen here. Next question, gentleman right here. We need some questions from the back as well.
Thank you. My name is Asad Ali Shah. I am former president of Institute of Chartered Accountants and currently managing partner of Deloitte Pakistan. My question is I think it is for you to direct it to any of the panelists. There is something unique in Pakistan, corporate governance, which I have not seen anywhere in the world, and that is with regard to the CFO's role. CFO in Pakistan under the corporate governance is required to attend all board meetings. So even though he may not be a board member, but he virtually becomes a board member. What do you think is the rationale for that? Do you support it? Do you oppose it? But let me give you my perspective on it. I think one aspect is that people say that because accountants made the Code of Corporate Governance, so they incorporated that provision. That is one of the criticisms, but I see the rationale from my perspective is that people expect in our society that accountants generally they have very high quality of integrity. We talked about fraud, corruption, etc. So when we're talking about fraud, when we're talking about corruption, I think we are also, perhaps society and the regulators expect CFOs, generally coming from accounting background, to be very upright and not only to just watch the interest of the shareholders, but also of all stakeholders. And perhaps that is the big responsibility that is given to the CFO and an aspect of CFO's role. So I would like to comment on it.
If we could have Rafi Saab, but I think one very important thing that you said, and which is something we can all be proud of, especially about our chartered accountants, is global economies have collapsed, banks have collapsed. In other countries, governments have bailed out banks. In our country, banks have bailed out the government. And I think a lot of it has to do with the corporate governance practices that we have here. And I think we can all be very proud of the institute here and the quality of product it comes up with. So the questions regarding the CFOs, their attendance and their participation with the board, yes or no?
Well, I'll share with you my personal experience. I've been CFO now 5 months. And I'm also sitting on a few other boards where the CFO is not on the board. I'm on the board of Shell Pakistan. And I think personally in any meeting where the CFO is not in there, I always make sure that we call them in. And the reason I do that is that for me the CFO, as you mentioned, okay, the background, he's an accountant, integrity, governance, that's part of his role as well. But I think the fact that the person is independent of trying to achieve a sales target, achieve a volumes target, the fact that his main job is actually to keep a tight control on the business, but also give us a view of the business from someone who's independent of the frontline salespeople. As you know, what is really happening here? To give that opportunity, you have to have that person in the room. You cannot, I know the CEO may know everything about the business itself and